Hi, it's Miss Pritzel at the Upper West Library, and I'm book talking a nonfiction history book. I've been reading a lot of these lately, partly because look how short it is. All right, so it's called Chasing Lincoln's Killer by James L. Swanson, and it deals with the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and the manhunt for John Wilkes Booth and his co-conspirators. So it starts out with John Wilkes Booth and his hatred of Abraham Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth was an actor, some of you may or may not know, and an actor who was well known enough that he literally could have gotten access to the president by just stopping at the White House and saying, "Hey, I'd like to see the president." But people knew his face, people knew his name, and acting was really an important role in the actual assassination. So him and his group of conspirators, so there were Southern people who he conspired with. Some of them lived in the Washington area, D.C. area, but some were from New York as well. And they had several plots. One of the plots was to abduct Lincoln, take him down south, and hold him for ransom, like to make peace terms and stuff like that. And they did have another attempt that failed. They didn't talk about that the author didn't talk about that too much. But there were a number of times. He literally had seen Lincoln at a speech, and he realized, if I'd had a gun, I could have shot him, which is kind of where all this came from. So the reason why they chose to kill him at Ford's Theater is because literally Booth, being an actor, he knew that theater inside and out. He knew that location totally. He knew the president's box. He knew the play. So he knew when to do it during the play, that the audience wouldn't necessarily hear the shot, or they might think it's part of the play. The other thing you have to understand is there was no Secret Service. There was very little security. It wasn't hard to get to see the president. But like I said, he didn't want to go to the White House and just say, "Hey, I want to see Abraham Lincoln," because he knew that would be a suicide mission. He wanted to survive this. He wanted to be famous. So after he assassinates Lincoln, the other thing is they planned to kill Secretary of State Seward, which they him and his co-conspirators, I should say, because it wasn't him in it, did actually attack Seward's two of his sons, his daughter, and a male Army nurse who was there because Seward was recovering from a carriage accident. And then the other plot was to kill Andrew Johnson, who was Abraham Lincoln's vice president, but the person who was supposed to do that backed out of it. Then there's this manhunt. Stanton, who is the Secretary of War, does a 12-day manhunt to get Booth. And some things go Booth's way, and you're like, oh, but then something else goes wrong. And so it just, there's one situation where he might have gotten away if not for the fact that they were taking a boat across at the Potomac River at night, and so he couldn't look at his compass, and they literally went the wrong way and ended up back where they kind of started. So, and then there was also a big reward for information, and some people wanted to get some of the reward money. So, yeah, it was just a fascinating book, and I really got into that manhunt stage. It was kind of like reading an action-adventure type thing, but it's real. So, highly recommend. Like I said, not a long read, but just a really fascinating book about, and having read a book recently, the impact of Lincoln being assassinated and how that impacted Reconstruction in the South, and how that everything might have been different. So reading this is like, oh yeah. All right, and Booth accomplished assassinating him, but he also turned Abraham Lincoln into a martyr, which is not what he wanted to do. He wanted to be the hero of the story, and he was not. So, if this is not your cup of tea, I'll help you find something else. Have a fantastic day, and keep on reading.